It's Christmas time. Lights on the house, trees covered in ornaments, manger scenes, Christians rolling their eyes whenever someone tries to tell us we're celebrating a pagan holiday. That's exactly how I do it too. That's even the sound that I make. Here are 7 Christmas traditions that some people will try to tell you are pagan in origin, even though they have zero historical evidence to support this. Depending on how one defines the word pagan, I would not have a problem with taking something that was pagan and redeeming it for something good, like the redeeming arc of the Grinch in How the Grinch Stole Christmas. It's one of my all-time favorite Christmas stories. That's part of what the Christmas story is all about. Grace, forgiveness. God is in the business of redeeming things. But there are some who's down in Whoville who think they can't celebrate Christmas because they incorrectly associate it with pagan traditions. And if you're a Christian and you disagree with me and you think that celebrating Christmas is heathenistic and any Christians who celebrate it are bound for hell, stick around to the end of this video because I have a question for you. Within the context of Christianity, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines pagan as non-religious or non-Christian. By this definition, an electric guitar is a pagan instrument, having been developed in the 1930s and 1940s for non-Christian purposes. Yet, churches everywhere regularly feature an electric guitar as part of their worship team, and at these services, people are getting saved. God is being honored. People are worshiping. Lives are being changed. So does it matter that the electric guitar was originally invented so non-Christians could celebrate sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Or is God bigger than that? So how pagan is Christmas really? Pagan Christmas thing that's not actually pagan. Number 1, celebrating Christmas on December 25th. This is the big one. This is the big sort of general argument that atheists love to throw at Christians during the holidays. But here's the actual historical timeline. Around 195 AD, approximately 200 years after Christ's birth, Clement of Alexandria wrote about Christians trying to determine the day Christ was born so they could celebrate it. By 211 AD, some Christians believed that Jesus had been born on December 25th, while others believed that it was sometime in April or May, but that's neither here nor there. The important point is that on the Roman civil calendar, also known as the Philocalean calendar, by 336 AD, there was a feast celebrating Christ's birth on December 25th. Speaking of the Philocalean calendar, it's here that we can also find the earliest reference to Sol Invictus, who many say is the sun god that Christmas was originally designed to celebrate. But this reference to Sol Invictus comes 50 years after mention of celebrations about Christ's birth. And yet the pagans claim that we stole from them. Okay. Maybe Sol Invictus was celebrated prior to this. We don't really know, but here's what we do know. The Sun God's Festival was also celebrated throughout the month of August and earlier in December, with there also being mention of it in October. So it seems as though it was celebrated whenever they wanted to. Until Christian apologist Wes Huff said, "It is just as possible and even more probable that the pagans moved their celebrations to December 25th to compete with the Christians, who were a growing religious majority at the time. The history doesn't support the idea that Christians stole December 25th from the pagans. History supports the other way around." Pagan Christmas thing number 2, stockings. The act of hanging your stockings by the chimney for Santa Claus to fill them with goodies was popularized in 1823 with the publication of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, also called A Visit from St. Nick, written by Clement Clark Moore, or Henry Livingston Jr., depending on which side of that debate you fall on. Prior to that, hanging your stockings by the fireplace at Christmas time wasn't really a practice, unless you lived in a geographical location where you had to hang your socks and shoes out by the fireplace to dry them out. There's nothing pagan about that. That's just something that some people had to do. According to Smithsonian Magazine, and I like to cite sources, by the way, unlike those who claim that Christmas is pagan, who usually can't offer up a single historically valid, scholarly reliable source indicating that such and such a Christmas tradition came from such and such a pagan ritual. They do not have the history to support their claims. Anyway, Smithsonian Magazine says that one legend of how the Christmas stocking came to be claims that St. Nicholas became aware of a poor family and wanted to help them out, but he knew the father would never accept charity. So one night, he slid down the chimney and put presents into the children's socks, which just so happened to have been recently cleaned and were hanging up to dry. This is mostly folklore, but it's already more substantive than some of the pagan myths because it involves a real person, Christmas, stockings. It doesn't tie back to pagan myths. The closest theory that people can point to indicating a pagan connection with Christmas stockings is Norse mythology, where children would leave their boots out for the god Odin, in which he would put gifts. Okay, boots, socks, I can see the connection, but this is clearly not the same thing. Furthermore, this tradition doesn't seem rooted in actual historical record and is probably more mythology. Christmas pagan thing that's not really pagan number 3, eating and drinking. Really? Eating and drinking. Apparently, the Romans used to eat on December 25th. Can you believe that? Winter solstice celebrations in Germanic and Norse traditions also included eating, drinking, gift-giving, and whatnot, but feasting was actually ordained by God thousands of years before these cultures developed. The act of sharing a feast with loved ones at a specified time is no more pagan than blinking your eyes. The fact that Christians eat and drink at the same time as some pagan traditions is of zero consequence. Actions alone are not necessarily evil. The intention behind them is. So if you want to eat and drink to the Roman sun god, go ahead. I don't do that, so I don't care. And most sensible Christians don't either. Trust me, you are not offending us when you try to convince us that we're stealing pagan traditions. We know it's not true. And even if it was, that's not why we're doing it. So carry on. Pagan lie number 4, Christmas lights are pagan. Well, it's true that many cultures all over the world have used lights, be they candles, fires, fireworks, sparklers, electric lights, to celebrate a wide variety of things. It's kind of moronic to assume that just because Christians use lights to celebrate Christmas, we're automatically celebrating something pagan. Holiday Bright Lights wrote in an article called A Brief History of Holiday Lights that the pagan tradition of Christmas lights has an unclear origin, meaning no one can really point to a specific time where Christmas lights were associated with a pagan celebration. Some pagan cultures would light additional lights around the holidays to provide more light to the area during the shorter winter days, but again, this is out of necessity, not some evil ritual. Now, some of these cultures would sometimes include some sort of ritual to honor a certain god, but a direct link between those rituals and decorating with lights for Christmas is non-existent. You can't find it. There's no connection. Christmas pagan thing number 5, mistletoe. And don't you even think about kissing under it, you harlots. Mistletoe does not go back to paganism. The first we hear of mistletoe as a Christmas decoration is in Robert Herrick's poetry, and William Cole's mention of it in The Art of Simpling, which was published in the 1600s. The Roman historian Pliny the Younger has said that mistletoe was used in a specific Roman ritual in the 1st century, but there's no evidence connecting that practice to Christmas specifically, or even Christianity. There were some early Christian churches that banned the use of mistletoe because they didn't want to be associated with what they perceived as a pagan practice, but this is called legalism, which is usually the result of failing to understand the theology of grace on a deeper level. And yes, that was an insult to dead people. I'm very sorry. History.com admits that even though medicinal use of the mistletoe can be traced back to the Romans and even the Greeks, it's unknown how the tradition of kissing under the mistletoe came to be associated with Christmas. And again, these people who claim that these traditions are pagan in origin are coming to their conclusions based on very little fact and way too much assumption. Pagan tradition number 6, caroling. That's right, you can't even sing at Christmas time, you heathen beasts. I already mentioned Sol Invictus, but another pagan celebration that people love to point to as the source for all of this stuff is the Roman festival of Saturnalia, which honored the agricultural god Saturn. It took place in the wintertime and is said to be where things like Christmas wreaths, candles, and caroling originated from. But like I explained earlier with the historical timeline of Sol Invictus, most of what is documented during pagan Roman celebrations around Christmas time comes after celebrations of Christ's birth that Christians had already started. The University of Plymouth published an article, with no sources, by the way, tracing the tradition of singing to pagan winter celebrations in the 4th century. But this is still long after Christians had already started celebrating the birth of Jesus. Now, it's possible that some of the Christmas carols and hymns that we have today sound similar to pagan songs of their era due to the use of certain chord progressions and styles that were popular at the time. But that's like music from any generation. Secular music and Christian music styles change and evolve over time based on what's popular. That doesn't make it pagan. It makes it easier to understand and sing along with. Pagan Christian thing that's not really pagan. Number 7, the Christmas tree. One of the earliest pagan origins of the Christmas tree that I ever heard about was from the story of Nimrod. According to some historians, Semiramis, Nimrod's mother and eventual wife, honored Nimrod after he died by planting a tree for him under which people would put presents as a form of worship. And this apparently happened in December, but the details vary depending on which historian you talk to because, guess what? This can't really be verified. If you Google the origin of the tradition of the Christmas tree, what you'll likely find are many articles talking about the Roman cult of Asherah. The claim is that this cult used to put up trees in their homes and decorate them as part of some ritual. But again, none of these articles can cite any reliable historical sources. There are even some who dispute the existence of the cult of Asherah. There is no scholarly evidence for any of this. People who are eager to tear down Christianity can point to a wide variety of ancient pagan traditions involving trees and wreaths and stockings and lights and be like, see, the Romans did it first, the Babylonians, the cavemen did it first, and that makes it pagan. But just because there are other tribes and tongues and nations that have traditions similar to Christianity doesn't mean they influenced Christianity. And that's a very important point. Let me show you what I mean. Legend has it that Martin Luther, in 1536-ish, looked up through the trees and saw the stars and was so inspired that he brought a tree into his home, decorated it with candles, and used it to tell his children the Christmas story of Jesus' birth. Now, I'll admit, this is also hard to verify, but check this out. Martin Luther was from Germany, and for about 300 years, the tradition of the Christmas tree was predominantly a German practice. If you ask the Germans where the tradition of the Christmas tree came from, they'll say, Martin Luther. It doesn't tie back to pagan roots, it ties back to a Christian trying to tell people about Jesus. The popularity of the Christmas tree didn't spread throughout the Western culture until the British royal family got a hold of it by means of Prince Albert, who was German. When drawings of Prince Albert and his family gathered around their tree began to circulate the world, the tradition of the Christmas tree started to catch on. So do you see what I'm trying to illustrate here? This is a legend you can trace. You can see pieces of it throughout history and trace it to a Christian source. You can't do that with the pagan theories. You can't trace them to a point where we can see the influence on Christmas. If you think decorating a tree for Christmas summons Satan, then maybe you should reconsider decorating anything, even your church building, or hanging up a cross, or singing songs in church, or using the Jesus fish symbol, because guess what? Most pagan traditions also involve worshiping in a decorated building, using cross-like sculptures, singing, playing instruments, religious motifs involving fish. Where do you draw the line? Now, I said I had a question for Christians who really think Christmas is pagan, despite the incredible lack of any historical evidence. Here's my question. What does it matter? God originally created everything, and he endowed humanity with the power to be creative. Music and art and decorations and festive lights can all honor God, should honor God. What makes anything evil is what we do with it. There's nothing pagan about any of this unless you make it that way. It's all about purpose. The purpose behind anything can be pagan if that's where your heart is. So what if Christmas is a pagan holiday? Are you worshiping a pagan god? The God that I worship is much bigger than these petty arguments, and he is in the business of redeeming everything, including the Christmas lights that are hanging on my house. This idea that Christmas is pagan comes up every year, despite the incredible amount of information refuting all of it. So I don't expect this video to change many minds, but maybe it's true. In Whoville, they say that one person, just one, can see the light if they're just shown the way. Merry Christmas, and thanks for watching. Until next time.